There's a thing people tend to do when they're imitating stereotypical, accents from the south of the US, Scotland and Ireland, and they'll pronounce what as what. And I'm sure that everyone watching this has heard this before. It also happens in some like posh British accents. You've probably heard it from like Family Guy with the Cool Whip gag.
You mean Cool Whip? Yeah, Cool Whip. Cool Whip. Cool Whip. Cool Whip. Cool Whip.
Basically, it's sort of a common knowledge thing that around the world that there's different dialects which pronounce words spelt with WH with instead of a W at the front, they pronounce it with a Wh. Thing is, if you go back to, Old English and early Middle English, the very oldest dialects of what we would recognize today as English. Basically, every word that we spell today with a WH was pronounced back then with a Wh. Universally, these words had Wh in them. It's more of a modern development where a lot of dialects have lost the Wh and started saying W instead. Starting at about 1200 in the south of England, and slowly, it started off as kind of only uneducated people pronounce what as what. It started out as kind of a stigmatized thing, as most sound changes in English do, but over time it became more and more common and spread throughout more and more dialects. And for example, Australian English comes from primarily from a dialect of English which already had this sound change, this loss of the Wh sound, and so no one in Australia says whine or what or where. We all say wine, what, where. This merger of the Wh and W sounds is known by linguists as the Whine-Wine Merger. Just because, people with the Whine-Wine Merger pronounce both of them the same, and people without it pronounce them differently. By now, most dialects of English around the world have the Whine-Wine Merger. So, as I said before, it's in my accent, Australian English, basically universally. I've never heard an Australian without it. Most of the south of England, pretty much all of the south of England, has the Whine-Wine Merger, as well as most of Wales, most of South Africa, but only younger people in New Zealand. The thing is, New Zealand, compared to Australia, has a very similar accent, so you might be thinking, why is New Zealand different? And it's because New Zealand had a lot more, when it was being invaded by the British, it had a lot more people from Ireland and Scotland coming in compared to Australia. And as I said before, Ireland and Scotland have the distinction between Wh and W, and so a lot of older people in New Zealand in certain places still have that distinction, even though otherwise they pretty much sound Australian. The majority of Americans also have the Whine-Wine Merger. You go to, and this gives rise to the whole pop culture thing of King of the Hill, how he pronounces basically every W as a Wh. So it's become kind of a pop culture thing in America, like a way of making fun of people from the south. Oh my, I'm surrounded by Slaters, I just realised. In Scots, in a few different varieties of Scots, the Wh sound has actually merged with F. And to see how this has happened, we can look at Japanese. In Japanese, basically the sound H before the sound U gives you the sound Hu, and that's usually written as an F, F-U. The hiragana Hu is typically written not as the phonemic HU, but how it sounds as FU. Because to our English ears, it sounds less like who and more like foo. Who, who, who. And this is because the rounding of the lips required to make the oo sound affects how the h sound sounds. God damn it, there's so many planes. This recording session today has been plagued with planes and birds and foreboding clouds of smoke. And so if you say h with rounded lips, h, a certain amount of friction happens at your lips rather than just at the back of the mouth like you normally have with h. There's a certain amount of labial friction. You'll notice that the what, where kind of sounds similar to fwat and fware because there's a certain amount of friction happening at the lips. And what's happened in these dialects of Scots is that the articulation, instead of just being kind of at the lips, has switched to being completely at the lips. And there was probably an intermediate stage where they said F-I-N-E as fine and W-H-I-N-E as whine, and then whine, And there was still a difference between whine and fwine, a slight articulatory difference, but then after a while you couldn't hear the difference anymore, and so people didn't articulate the difference anymore, and it just became universally fine. And one more interesting thing about the distribution of this sound change is in Black Isle English, they drop the letter H at the start of words, so like hat would become at, but they also drop WH, so what would become ot. So just to top this off, I'm going to play some recordings of people from around the world who do pronounce a difference between W and WH, who do not have the Whine-Wine Merger, and I'm going to have a little map on screen tell you where they're all from. Thank you for watching. I hope the planes and the smoke weren't too annoying, and I'll see you next week.
I would see no objection why he wouldn't give his views to the Senate Judiciary Committee.
And the other half was the living part of it, where we stayed all the time, of course.
They encountered boys at Harvard or wherever.
Say white. This is that WH thing, isn't it? People say I do it weird. White. Am I supposed to say white? It's not, it's white. Cool Whip. Shut up!
We bring them fishing anywhere they want to go. We use the Tweed, we use all the tributaries of the